Today we are talking about the subconscious, specifically why Franz Bardon views it as the opponent in his system, and the 4 principles you can use to turn it into your ally. But first, we must understand something critical. Of course, subconscious programs like smoking and drinking every day are bad habits. But not only are they bad habits, someone is benefiting directly from the fact that you have these bad habits. So the true nature of these subconscious programs is much more malevolent than you think. This is critical to understand because if you are not in control of the programs your subconscious runs, someone else is. And 9 times out of 10, they are not programming it to benefit you. So in this video, we will cover what people think the problem is, the subconscious mechanism explained as a tyrant ruler, how Bardon's system exposes this ruler, and finally, the 4 principles to master the subconscious. My name is Valentine, and this is the Akashic Order, a disciplined study of Hermetic philosophy and occult systems like Franz Bardon's Initiation Into Hermetics. This is a structured system dedicated to complete mastery of the individual through these occult teachings. And if that sounds like something you're looking for, hit subscribe and join the Akashic Order. But I must warn you, applying what you learn in these videos is expected. Okay, so now let us begin. Let's make this uncomfortable for a moment, because this is where most people stay stuck for years. When you look at your lack of progress, you don't usually question what's underneath it. You reach for the closest explanation available. You say, I don't have enough time. I just need more discipline. I probably need a better method. Maybe I'm just not built for this. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. They sound like things that you could eventually fix. But look closer, because each one of these excuses falls apart the moment you examine it honestly. You say you don't have time, but somehow time appears for the things that don't challenge you. Scrolling, watching, distracting yourself. Time exists, just not for the things that require you to change. So it's not time. You say you lack discipline, but you do have discipline, just in areas that are already comfortable. You can follow routines that don't demand internal resistance. You can stay consistent when there's no friction. So it's not discipline either. You say you need a better method, but if you're honest, you haven't fully committed to a single method long enough to see it work. You've sampled systems, you've touched practices, but you haven't stayed long enough to confront what happens when it gets difficult. So it's not the method. And then comes the quiet one. Maybe I just don't have the talent for this. But that's just your mind trying to close the case, to give you a final answer so you stop looking deeper. Because if it's lack of talent, then you're off the hook. No more responsibility, no more confrontation. But that explanation is convenient, not accurate, because none of these are the real cause. They are symptoms of something operating underneath your conscious decisions. And this is where most people go wrong. They try to fix the surface. They try to manage time better, force more discipline, or search for the perfect system. But if the root cause is untouched, the pattern simply repeats. Different day, same outcome. So what you've been calling the problem is actually just a visible expression of something much deeper, a misdiagnosis. And until that diagnosis changes, nothing else will. Now we need to talk about the mechanism underneath all of this, because when people hear the word subconscious, they imagine something mystical or vague. But in reality, it's much more practical than that. Your subconscious is not just a hidden mind. It is a system that has been built over years of repetition. Every habit you've formed, every reaction that you've repeated, every pattern that you've allowed to run without questioning it. All of that slowly constructed a kind of internal operating structure. And that structure has one primary job: maintain stability. Not improvement, not growth, not transformation, stability. Which means something important that most people miss. Your subconscious does not measure whether your current state is strong or weak. It only measures whether it's familiar. And familiarity to the subconscious equals safety. So even if you consciously want to grow, even if you want discipline, there is another layer of you that is trying to keep everything exactly the same. A good way to understand this is to imagine your subconscious as a tyrant ruler. For years, it has governed your behaviors. It has established routines, decided what feels normal, determined what you default to when you're tired, stressed, or distracted. And rulers, especially tyrants, do not give up power easily. When something new appears, a new habit, a new discipline, a practice like Bardon's exercises that demand awareness and control, the ruler sees it as a threat. Not because it's bad, but because it's unfamiliar. And unfamiliar means instability. So what does the ruler do? It resists, sometimes quietly, sometimes subtly, but it will consistently resist. Now here's where this becomes even more interesting, because this is not just philosophy or spiritual language. There is a biological mechanism behind it. Your brain is constantly trying to automate behavior. When you repeat something enough times, it starts getting stored and executed by parts of the brain designed for efficiency rather than conscious control. One of the key areas involved in this process is the basal ganglia, often referred to as the reptilian brain. Its role is to help turn repeated actions into automatic routines. This is why things like driving a car, tying your shoes, or checking your phone happen without you even thinking about them. Over time, the brain creates what scientists call a habit loop. It looks like this. A cue appears, your brain runs a routine, you receive some form of reward or relief. Cue, routine, reward. And every time this loop repeats, it becomes stronger. So what happens when you start practicing something like Bardon's system? You are interrupting that loop. You're asking the mind to stop running automatically and to start operating consciously. From the perspective of the subconscious system, this is a major disruption. You're not just adding a new habit, you are directly challenging the ruler that has been in control for years. And this is the part most students never realize. The resistance you feel isn't random. It's the system defending the structure it's built through repetition, because its primary job is to preserve what already exists. And if you don't understand that, you will keep interpreting resistance as failures, when in reality, it's actually proof that you've begun pushing against the mechanism that has been in control this entire time. We can regard our subconscious as our opponent, the incentive or the impulse to all that is undesirable, such as our passions, our failures, our weaknesses. Let us learn how to transmute this, so to speak, antagonistic part of our ego, so that it not only does no harm, but on the contrary, will help to realize our desires. Now, this is where Bardon's system separates itself from everything else that you've tried, because most systems, if you actually look at them, don't require you to become conscious. They work around your current patterns. They give you motivation. They give you inspiration. They give you frameworks that feel productive. Some of them even give you a new identity to wear, something that makes you feel like you're progressing, without actually disrupting the deeper structure underneath. And that's why they feel easier to stick to, because you can follow them while still remaining largely automatic. You don't have to confront the system running in the background. But Bardon's system does something very different. It doesn't try to work around your subconscious. It brings you into direct conflict with it. He asks you to sit still, not just physically, but mentally, to observe your thoughts without immediately following them, to direct your attention and hold it there intentionally. And that sounds simple until you actually try to do it. Because the moment you sit down and attempt something like that, you start to see what's actually happening inside your mind. Thoughts don't stop, they scatter. They pull you in different directions. Your attention drifts, your focus breaks, and your body starts to feel restless. And suddenly, what looked like a basic exercise becomes impossible to sustain. And that's not because the exercise is too advanced. It's because for the first time, you are no longer cooperating with the automatic system. You are interrupting it. You are stepping in and saying, I'm not going to follow every thought. I'm not going to react to every impulse. I'm going to choose what happens here. And from the perspective of the subconscious, that is a direct challenge, because control is shifting. The old ruler is no longer operating without resistance. So what happens? The system pushes back, not aggressively, but just enough to make it feel difficult. Just enough to make it feel like it's not working. And this is why Bardon's system feels harder than other systems. Not because it's unnecessarily complex, and not because it requires something that you don't have, but because it removes your ability to stay unconscious while you practice. It forces awareness, and awareness exposes everything. It exposes lack of control. It exposes constant mental movement. It exposes how quickly you fall back into patterns. And for most people, that exposure is uncomfortable enough to cause them to stop. So they assume the system is the problem, but what they're actually experiencing is the friction that comes with trying to take back control from something that has been running for years. That's the real cause. And once you see this clearly, Bardon's system stops looking like an obstacle and starts revealing itself like a tool that shows you exactly where you're not in control. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Bardon's system and are interested in starting it, check out the Initiation into Hermetics in the description and the pinned comments. But be warned, it is detailed and requires attention, and that is meant to filter out those not willing to put in the work or time for true transformation and power. So if this system is not something that you can overpower, if force alone keeps triggering more resistance, then the approach has to change. Because you're not trying to destroy the subconscious, you're trying to retrain it. And that means you don't win through intensity. You win through alignment, working with the system instead of constantly colliding with it. And there's a simple framework for doing that, but only if you apply it consistently. Now, before we get into the 4 principles I'm about to explain, if you're enjoying this video, the best way that you can support the channel is by liking and commenting down below. So let me know your thoughts down below, or if you have any questions or ideas for future videos. I do read every comment, and I truly appreciate the support each of you have shown so far. Now, the 4 principles. Number 1, repetition over intensity. The first principle is this: repetition beats intensity every time. Most people approach this the wrong way. They get motivated, they sit down, and they try to do everything perfectly for as long as possible. 30 minutes, an hour, sometimes longer. And for that one session, it feels powerful. But then the next day, there's resistance. And the day after that, it gets harder to start. Within a week, it collapses. Why? Because the subconscious doesn't change through bursts of effort. It changes through consistent exposure. From a neurological perspective, this is how neuroplasticity works. Your brain strengthens pathways that are used repeatedly, not the ones used intensely once in a while. So a simple shift changes everything. 10 minutes every day will rewire you faster than 2 hours once a week. Because now you're speaking the language of the system: repetition, familiarity, and stability. You're not shocking it. You're gradually rewriting it. Number 2. Precision over fantasy. One of the easiest ways to lose progress is to become more interested in what comes later than what you're doing right now. You start thinking about advanced stages, deeper states, higher abilities, and the basic exercise in front of you begins to feel small. So your attention drifts. Your execution becomes loose, inconsistent, half present. But here's the reality. The subconscious does not respond to what you imagine. It responds to what you repeat accurately. So instead of chasing what's next, you narrow your focus completely. Don't chase advanced states. Sit down and do the exact exercise correctly. Even if it feels simple, even if it feels slow, because precision is what builds control, and control is what makes the advanced stages possible. Number 3. Observation over reaction. The third principle is where most people break. When resistance shows up, the instinct is to fight it, to push harder, to force yourself through it. But that often creates more friction, because now you're adding emotional resistance on top of the subconscious resistance that's already there. Instead, the shift is subtle but powerful. When resistance shows up, don't fight it, notice it. You feel the urge to stop? Observe it. You hear the thought, "This isn't working?" Observe it. You feel distracted or restless? Observe it. This creates a distance between you and the reaction. And there's actual science behind this. Practices like mindfulness have been shown to reduce activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for emotional reactivity, which means the more you observe, the less automatic your reactions become. And that's the goal. Not to eliminate resistance completely, but to stop being controlled by it. Number 4, daily proof over big promises. This is where consistency either locks in or falls apart, because the mind loves long-term identity. I'm going to master this. I'll be consistent this time. This is the year everything changes. But those statements don't change behavior. They create pressure, expectation, and eventually disappointment, because they're disconnected from action. So instead, you shrink the focus. Don't tell yourself you'll master this in a year. Prove to yourself you can show up today. That's it. One session, done properly. Because every time you show up and follow through, You give the subconscious new evidence, new proof of identity. And identity is ultimately what rewrites the system. Not ideas, not intentions, but repeated, completed actions. When you combine these 4 principles, repetition, precision, observation, and daily proof, something shifts. You stop trying to overpower the system, and you start quietly retraining it. No resistance spikes, no dramatic swings, just steady, controlled change. And over time, the same subconscious that once resisted you becomes the thing that supports you. So when you step back and look at this clearly, the problem was never what you thought it was. It wasn't time, it wasn't discipline, it wasn't the method. It was the part of you that's been trained over years through repetition to keep you exactly where you are. And that is where Bardon's path truly begins. Because in this system, you are not just learning techniques. You're not just progressing through exercises. You are confronting the structure that has been running your life without question. The habits you default to, the thoughts you automatically believe, the impulses you follow without awareness. And for most people, that confrontation is where they stop. Not because they lack potential, but because they underestimate what they're actually up against. This is not a casual path. This is not something that you drift through. It demands something very specific from you. The willingness to see clearly, and the discipline to act anyway. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when it feels slow, even when there's no immediate reward. Because every time you sit down and practice, you choose awareness over automation. You're doing something that most people never do. You're taking control back. And if you do that long enough, something begins to change. The resistance weakens, the patterns loosen, your mind becomes quieter, more direct, more precise. Not because you forced it, but because you trained it. And that's the shift. You move from being controlled to the one in control. And once that happens, everything else in this system starts to open because the foundation is no longer unstable. Your mind is no longer scattered. The work can finally go deeper. So understand this clearly. The first enemy in Bardon's system is not outside you. It is not the difficulty of the exercises. It is not the complexity of the path. It's the part of you that would rather stay untrained than become disciplined. The part that chooses comfort over control, familiarity over growth, automation over awareness. And if you can face that consistently without turning away, you are not just studying the system. You are becoming capable of mastering it. Because the moment you stop losing to that internal resistance, you are no longer a beginner, and you begin walking the path the way it's meant to be walked, with clarity, control, and intent, because the real enemy was never outside you.